Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello everyone, I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. This is Ask the Grant Writing Expert. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have nearly 40 years of experience at NIH, first as an applicant, then as a postdoctoral fellow, then as a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $650 million and counting dollars in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your questions. So in terms of what you should be viewing right now, it's April 1st, so I am hoping that if you're working in the R and K series, all your prep steps are done, and that you've moved on to watching the lessons about writing your grant application. So for example, in the Master the R Series course, that would be chapters 3 and 4 primarily, and that maybe you're working off of other courses like Checklists to Avoid Top Mistakes, or maybe the Human Subjects Form, or polishing up your rigor scoring criteria and looking at that course as we hurdle toward the June deadlines. So, in terms of news coming out of NIH, things have quieted down a bit since the flurry of news that always comes out at the beginning of the calendar year. So one topic that I am keenly paying attention to is when NIGMS will release the NOFO for the R35. So my friend, Dr. Rebecca Miro, has come back today to talk about the NIGMS ESI R35 NOFO. I get a million questions about this all the time, both emailed and asked at AGE. We had hoped that NIH would have released the NOFO by the time we gave this mini tutorial. It was supposed to post on March 1st. It is now April 1st as of this recording, and it hasn't been released, but everything is delayed at NIH right now. The upcoming deadline is October 5th, and I trust and hope, knock on wood, that it's released in time for you to put in an application for that deadline. So, Becky, you want to introduce yourself, and we'll talk about the R35 today?
Sure thing. So I have been a research administrator for the bulk of my career. At this point, probably over 25 years as a research administrator, mostly in higher ed. I've done some research support for nonprofits as well. I'm a certified research administrator since the inception of that credentialing back in 2004, and I have a PhD in higher ed administration with a research methods concentration. So NIH made preparing these slides a little bit challenging, but in the end, had nothing to add for the NIGMS ESI. So let's get started. Let me make sure I can share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So we're going to talk about all of the R35s across NIH today, not just NIGMS. So basically, the R35 is an activity code that is the Outstanding Investigator Award, is what NIH calls it. NIGMS gives it its own name, and they call it the MIRA, or Maximizing Investigators Research Award. And the research projects that are awarded to outstanding investigators, they provide them longer term support, and we'll see that some of them go beyond the typical 5 years that like an R01 would have. But they provide long-term support for any research in their laboratory, not just one specific project, as long as it parallels the mission of the institute or center that issues the award. The logic is that this allows the researcher to pursue higher risk, adventurous research. They can pivot, and it gives them flexibility to change research directions if there's something new and emerging that comes up. And they also, one of the points that NIH makes in the NOFOs is that this also leads to reduced administrative burden. And I imagine they mean, if you've got one bigger grant that you can do a few things with, there's less reporting, and from a sponsored research perspective, less administrative burden there as well to manage one award instead of multiple. So which institutes and centers issue R35s? When I did another iteration of this presentation a few years ago, we had 4 institutes and centers that were offering them. Not anymore. NCI and NINDS are out. And so right now, only NHLBI and NIGMS offer R35s. So at NHLBI, there are two NOFOs. One is the Outstanding Investigator Award, and the other is the Emerging Investigator Award. And if anybody wants URLs after we're done with the presentation, just let Meg know and we can share this. And I can update these to have the actual URLs. And then at NIGMS, there's the Early Investigator / New Investigator NOFO. And then, like Meg mentioned, the ESI one, which hasn't been released yet, supposed to be out March 1st. It's listed as anticipated on grants.gov, but it's not out. And all the others, the closing dates are nicely kind of a ways out, right? Because some of these NIH ones lately have been, they issue them and the closing date is very soon behind on a couple things. So I'll say that if I were to have summarized into slides everything that's in all of these NOFOs, we'd have like 10 more slides than I came up with. So I'm going to just touch on some highlights from all of the NOFOs and give you an idea of what kind of things they look at in different categories and criteria. So for example, eligibility, and I'll say read the NOFO carefully. They are so long and so convoluted because there's so many details. But for example, eligibility can depend on what your currently funded research project grants are. Some have criteria that the R35 funding can't overlap with other projects. Some don't allow the R35 and other research grant applications to be pending at the same time. And some of the NOFOs mentioned that investigators might need to relinquish certain awards in order to accept the R35. Then there were criteria about, well, you can apply for an R35 if you're in year 6 of something, or if you're in a no-cost extension year. So there's a lot of eligibility criteria. Other unique aspects of the R35s. So the MIRA, which is the NIGMS one, the award amounts are affected by your current funded amounts if you are funded. So they'll reduce they'll reduce your award if you're funded elsewhere. But again, you'd have to look at the NOFO. As far as required minimum effort for the MIRA, you have to put in a minimum of 45% of your total research effort. And for the OIA and the EIA, you have to dedicate a minimum of 6-person months. All the R35s, so the MIRA is 5 years, but the OIA and the EIA can go as far as 7 years. And all the deadlines differ from what we know the NIH standard due dates to be. So again, check the NOFO for those specifics. And I kept this slide in here. So R35s are reviewed so the study sections review most of them, but NHLBI has multiple special emphasis panels every review cycle. NIGMS has over 6, or I think I saw 8 study sections just for R35s. And they'll organize the special emphasis panels as needed. And I did find that they take the ESIs, the EI, and the NI applications, they cluster them by investigator level, and then they get reviewed together that way. And we are going to have an older blog post about the R35. We're in the process of updating that. We should have that posted later today, if not first thing tomorrow. And both NIH, both NHLBI and NIGMS have really good FAQs on the R35s. So like the NHLBI one, if I remember correctly, it was multiple questions from, should I apply to all the administrative requirements if you've been awarded? So lots and lots of questions. So don't forget to go out there and look at that. That was everything. Does anybody have questions?
That's great, Becky. Thanks. So, just a reminder to people that you can, we have a searchable blog. And as Becky said, she'll have a blog post up there probably within the next business day or so. If you just go to our homepage, bouviergrant.com, sorry, I have such a difficult to spell last name for non-French people. Bouviergrant.com, it's in the upper right corner of the blog post. If you just click on it, it's searchable. So you can go in there and search by topic. But be careful because we have old R35 blog posts up that won't be relevant. So I actually have a funded R35 application up in front of me because I have a client who is fairly recently funded on an R35. About 6 months ago, they heard about their funding. So I have the application up in front of me. I can't show it to you, but I can look at it and answer questions for you. It is a weird grant application. It's a narrative. It's like writing an essay. There's no aims page. And as Becky said, like part of the advantage of the R35 is that it gives you lots of flexibility. So, it's like the ultimate in investigator initiated research, right? Because you're basically just saying, give me money because I'm a good researcher and I have some interesting ideas, but I'm not going to know what I'm going to pursue from year to year. You're just going to have to trust me. So it's kind of a tricky thing to write, because you can't, we're all so used to writing grant applications that are built around specific aims, like a known project, specific aims. This is what I'm planning to do across a certain period of time with a certain budget. It's really well mapped out. Here it's kind of like these are some general lines of research that I'm interested in pursuing based on my preliminary data and some ideas I have. But you can't talk about aims, so I think the way we did it in this application, um, let's see. So, like the way it's structured, it's a 6-page research strategy, and the first part is background gaps and challenges. The second one is recent progress by the PI, and it's usually a single PI. So that's where you talk about some general lines of research, and you can talk about an overview of future research projects. And we broke it down by like project one, project two, but they were question based the way we wrote them, so that they sounded less like specific aims and more like themes. You're really writing around certain types of scientific themes. So historically, as Becky said, there have been 4 of these, where it's 4 different institutes that offered them. NIGMS has always had the biggest program for R35. And as Becky said, that one is specifically called a MIRA. And I find that most of my applicants use the term MIRA synonymously with R35. But the important thing to know is that there are R35s outside of NIGMS. Right now, the only active portfolio is at NHLBI, but that may change as the year progresses because NCI for a very long time has had an active R35 portfolio, and I wouldn't be surprised if they implemented it again at some point in 2026. And NINDS has dipped in and out of that portfolio as well. So we'll see. Okay, I have somebody saying, how are we supposed to ask questions in the chat? No, ask it in the Q&A. So anybody who's new, we do have some new members who have come in. So just if you're brand new here, you're in listen only mode in this format in the live stream Q&A, which occurs every other Wednesday. And the way you ask questions is by typing it into the Q&A box. You can also put comments in the comment box if you'd like, if anybody has comments there. Right now in the comment box is Becky's bio and a link to the blog. But yeah, feel free to put any comments there. So one of the other things I wanted to address is that, and Becky, remind me, because these things, the NOFO has changed so much from time to time, from institute to institute, and the ESI version versus the established investigator version. But I believe that typically the ESI and IGMS version doesn't allow the same science you can't have any other grant applications in review at NIGMS at the same time as you have an NIGMS MIRA in review. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
I'm trying to remember because they're so long, and let me look. I've got the guidelines open, so give me a minute and I'll look for it.
Yeah. Because I think the way that I've gotten around that with my clients in the past is, and I don't know what it's going to say in the new NOFA. We're going to have to wait and see. But the way that we've gone around that in the past is that I've had clients, because it's hard to put in an application, and it takes however many months to write an application, you submit it, and then it's at least 9 months to find out if it's been funded. So not being able to submit anything else during that time is a long time. And like these are really competitive. The NIGMS MIRA is a very competitive mechanism. So the way that I've gotten around that with clients in the past is that we try, if at all possible, to tinker with the science enough to be able to pitch it to a different institute so that you can have some other application in review on a different type of science that maybe is relevant to the mission of NIGMS, but you might be able to get it far enough along that you could send it to a disease-specific institute so that you can kind of hedge your bet in terms of your funding so that you're not just like locking up more than a year waiting for an answer on your NIGMS MIRA.
So a PI can't have a MIRA application and another NIGMS research project, so an R01, an R15, so on, pending review at the same time.
Yeah, which is really problematic because, like, okay, I get that the same science can't be in review at the same time simultaneously at NIH. It's always been the rule, but you literally can't have any other application in an NIGMS simultaneously, and that's a problem.
And it also says here that a PI who's awarded a MIRA must discontinue funding from other NIGMS research grants, except and it lists like four conditions below.
Yeah, that's less of a problem because most people will happily give up other funding if they can have the NIGMS MIRA because of the flexibility and the longer funding period that it allows you. So it's much more desirable than a traditional R01. But the problem is that it's competitive, it's hard to land, and you can't put in any other kind of application at NIGMS at the same time. So the trick here in terms of the strategy sometimes is to think about, if at all possible, to try and get a different project far enough along. So let me explain how NIGMS works, right? So NIGMS funds mechanistic research that is like you're looking at like a molecular mechanism that underlies multiple types of diseases in different systems. It might be different types of cancers, neurodegenerative disorders, aging, but you're just looking at the mechanism right now. And because it's like this fundamental mechanism, it's not going to be appropriate for funding at NCI or aging or NINDS or wherever. So GMS picks that up. So once you start moving into a really specific disease area, so now you're looking at the mechanism specifically within the context of cancer, it's no longer really an NIGMS project. Now they expect you to go on to have that funded through NCI. So sometimes an applicant will try to get the project far enough along, a different project far enough along that they can send it to NCI while they put in their NIGMS MIRA in a more general context. So sometimes that's the strategy. We do have a couple of questions. So what's the difference between an early stage investigator and a new investigator? Yeah. So both of these things confer a small funding advantage. The difference is that an early stage investigator is a person who is 10 years or less from their terminal degree or whatever their last clinical training was. Like if you're a clinician and you did a clinical fellowship, the clock would start at the end of the clinical fellowship. So you're 10 years or less from your terminal degree or that time point, and you have not been awarded, you've never served as a PI on an R01 or R01 equivalent. So that it confers a funding advantage. And at some institutes, it's a significant funding advantage. It's pretty typical that the funding advantage is around 4 or 5 percentage points. So let's say your institute funds R01s up to 10%. They'll fund their ESIs up to 15%. For some institutes, it's smaller, and for others, it could be quite a bit larger. Like NIA has typically had really generous ESI funding advantages. New investigator is you are past that 10-year window. So you're more than 10 years from your terminal degree or your last clinical fellowship. However, you have not served as a PI on an R01 or equivalent. That usually confers a smaller funding advantage. So, like at an institute that gives you like 5 percentage points on the ESI, they might give you like 1 or 2 percentage points on the NI status. So, and many of these R35 mechanisms are broken out into the ESI version and the established investigator, new investigator version. So that's usually the distinguishing point. So NIGMS has two versions, the ESI one, which is the one that isn't out yet, and the other one, which is for established investigators and new investigators, EI and NI, which is out. That one is available. So that's the difference between new investigator and early stage investigator. So this person is asking, but does that preclude sending an R to a different institute? No, it's only at NIGMS. So it's just a weird rule that they haven't, and who knows if it's going to be on the new NIGMS Mira no focus. It's not out yet, but historically it's been pretty consistent. But yeah, you can send an R, any kind of an R application to a different institute. It's just that you can't have another NIGMS R of any kind, R21, R03, R15, nothing. You can't have another R on a project at NIGMS simultaneously. Let's see, were there other things that I wanted to comment on? Let me see if there's anything in the application that as a 6-page application, like I'm looking at this application, there is not one tiny bit of white space on this thing. It goes right to the very bottom of page 6. And there are no paragraph breaks, basically. So in this particular type of application, as with all 6-page applications, R03, R21, this one, the GMS Mira, I use other formatting strategies to create visual breaks instead of white space. I don't use lines between or even partial lines between sections. I usually use things like shading or bolding or bullets to help create visual breaks. How much preliminary data should you have? It's really, the question is how far along in your career are you, right? Because it's not, you're talking about broad research directions. And, I've over the years, when I think back on the funded R35s that I've seen, some of them have come from applicants who have not had a staggering amount of data, particularly for the ESI versions of these awards. I think the thing that, if I had to say, the thing that really moves the needle on these is how exciting your ideas are, because it's like a paradigm shift out of the R series or the K series. You're not saying, here are my preliminary data, here are my specific aims, this incremental thing. It's more kind of like, I've been working in these areas and I have some broad ideas about how to explore this avenue or that avenue. So you don't necessarily have a lot of preliminary data per se. And the thing is that, as with a lot of these quirky mechanisms, sometimes the best thing to do if you think you might be interested in it is to talk to a program officer first and foremost and talk to them about your ideas to see if they would be a good fit. And if you have the time, write it up and put it in and see how a study section reacts to it. So this particular one that's sitting in front of me, we did resubmit it. I worked on both versions, the first submission and the resubmitted version, which was ultimately funded in with a start date of July 1 of 2025. So it was funded at the May 2025 council. And Sometimes it's just a matter of trying, but again, with the caveat that you then can't put in other grant applications to NIGMS at the same time. So you have to kind of like game it out to figure out, like, can I sit out NIGMS for a year while I wait for an answer on this? Maybe you could take your other projects and retool them and submit them to another institute in the meantime to hedge your bet in case you don't get the Mira. So, anyway. I know it's not, everybody always asks, how much preliminary data should I have for fill in the blank? And it's always kind of a nebulous, like it's the $1 million question, right? And some of it is just developing the feel for it and working with mentors to see what they think. So, but also these are not always at standing study sections, so at least for the time being, who knows how that's going to change as things at NIH move out of the ad hoc institute-based SEPs and into standing study sections at CSR. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to sift through. Riley, don't clear all of these yet, because I'm gonna try to sift through and see if there are R35 specific ones before I answer the non-R35 ones. Okay, that's on scoring criteria. So here's a person pertaining to the R35. I guess a strong CV in the field of which an outstanding investigator applies will define their exceptional status. Is that correct? Well, it depends, right? Because if you're an ESI, you're not going to have like 100 publications. You're just not, So in the case of the ESI version, it's how strong you've been to date given where you are in your career, and weighted very heavily, particularly on the ESI version of it, is how exciting the ideas are, how innovative the ideas seem. So NIH is often criticized for funding next logical steps research, and they do have that portfolio of high risk, high reward mechanisms, none of which have been reissued yet, but which are supposed to be reissued in 2026. This is yet another version, essentially, of a high risk, high reward mechanism, because they're kind of just saying, go do what you want to do, So, and the trick is to figure out how to convey that. But on the established investigator version, definitely a strong CV, good track record of funding and publication is really going to carry the day. That's a little more straightforward. The ESI version is not straightforward because you're just too junior to have a strong track record. So you got to rely on, the publications you do have and how exciting your ideas are. Let's see. So here's somebody saying a new investigator should be always an assistant professor. Otherwise, in order to apply as new investigator, they should be already hired as a faculty or a researcher working in a university after their 10-year period of PhD can apply for it. So NIH doesn't really get involved at all with whether you're an assistant, associate, or full professor, or even whether you're a faculty member. Really, their only requirement is that your institute will sponsor you in this grant application. Remember that technically you're not submitting the grant application, your institute is submitting it on your behalf. So your university or medical center is submitting it on your behalf. They may have rules about what you're allowed to apply for, but NIH doesn't tend to have rules around that kind of thing. I'm in research development, so I assist faculty with applications, and I often see AIMS simply rebranded as topic one, et cetera. Can you offer advice on how to shift the mindset from AIMS to more open-ended questions? I love this question because this is exactly what's so hard about writing these. So, I've seen them called Project One. I've also seen them called Research Direction One. So I think it's a tricky thing to answer, but sometimes I find that what helps is rather than asking the researcher to hand me a draft, I start them off with a phone call and we talk through what they want to do. And I get them to start talking about what their research directions are that they want to accomplish. And I will say, I suspect that a lot of applicants are actually writing specific aims and then just turning those into projects, as you've said, and not submitting the specific aims. And this is like absolutely the wrong way to write the research strategy of a MIRA. So, but if you talk to the researcher, they often not only are they able to speak in terms of broad directions, they often uh, tend to do that instead of speaking in terms of projects. And they get very excited about the ideas and the research directions. And during that conversation, I find that sometimes I can help them by saying, oh, well, what you just described, looking at this broad area of how this mechanism might work or how this might fit into that disease area, that sounds like a research direction that might be appropriate for a MIRA. How might you phrase that as a project, as a general direction? And from there, I can often get them to devise these broad directions instead of being so aims focused, which is, to be fair, how we were all trained. We were all trained to think that way in terms of generating specific aims. So sometimes a conversation can really help them. Like if you sit down and talk to them for half an hour, you can kind of pull out in the conversation. It sounds like you talked about two broad directions that you want to pursue in your lab. The other thing is to ask them what their 5 to 10 year plan is, and that immediately zooms them out to the 30,000-foot level rather than zooming them into what specific aims you want to pursue in the next 2 or 3 years. It really kind of zooms them out when you think about the 5 to 10 year plan. And then just get them to modify it so that whatever questions they're asking in that research direction is appropriate for the time frame of the MIRA. But yeah, that is the question. That is exactly the tough thing to do. It's such a great question. The phrase high risk, high reward is appealing, but it appears that the NIH prefers to invest in research proposals where there is a reasonable expectation that the work will lead to impactful outcomes. Ultimately, this seems to be the criterion that a council uses when making funding decisions, correct? By and large, that is correct. But when you're dealing with a mechanism like the MIRA, it's almost impossible to review an application in those terms because by definition, you're not proposing a project. But yes, that is, I honestly, even in the high risk, high reward portfolio, I think that is largely the case at NIH that NIH, listen, since I've been looking at grant applications since the late 1980s, and since that time, everybody has complained about how NIH only funds next logical steps research. They have a gigantic portfolio compared to other funding agencies, and they don't gamble with taxpayer dollars. But having said that, there are options for people who are doing truly high risk, high reward work within and outside of NIH. If you're really doing high risk, high reward stuff, not NIH's in air quotes, high risk, high reward, but really high risk, high reward, don't pursue NIH funding. I would really suggest that you look at either other agencies. So like I have a friend who's a retired program officer from CDMRP, the DoD portfolio, and they do fund things that are truly high risk, high reward. Like that's what they're looking to fund for many of their topic areas. The other thing is that foundation funding is often looking for that really truly risk-taking kind of project. So sometimes that's the better choice. So yeah, it is true that it's, high risk, high reward at NIH is kind of in air quotes, even within those portfolios. Let's see. Let me see if I can find any other R35 ones here. I would like to know what those real high risk, high reward opportunities are. ARPA-H, DARPA. Well, I don't work in those agencies, so the only one that I know of for sure is CDMRP. And if you're curious to know more about that, I'm not sure. You should have access to recordings from our past Ask the Grant Writing Experts. That should be on your dashboard. You can actually go into the bonus mini tutorials and look for a guest named Emily Clemens, who runs her own grant writing company, but she's the retired program officer from CDMRP from the Department of Defense. And she spoke at the last time she appeared on this live stream. She spoke about the CDMRP portfolio and the mechanisms where they're really looking for high risk, high reward, even though it's federal funding, because federal funding tends to be pretty conservative in what they fund, particularly at NIH. But I can't speak to those other agencies because I don't work in them. Yeah, but if you're interested in those, drop me an email and I do have a friend who writes, actually, Becky, I'm thinking of Burr, our mutual friend Burr. He may, and I actually have a coffee chat coming up with him in 2 weeks. I can ask him to come on and talk about DARPA or ARPA-H if that's of interest. So let me know. Okay, I think that's the end of our R35 mini tutorial. I'm going to start out answering the non-R35 questions, but feel free to ask more R35 questions if you like. With the new NIH review policy, Factor 1 covers significance and innovation, and it's supposed to be only based on what is written in the specific aim section. No, that's not accurate. Factor 1 is, it pertains to the research strategy and it pertains to the significance and innovation sections of the research strategy. And then the person goes on to say, does that mean we're supposed to write the approach differently? Traditionally, there are significant and innovation in the approach. So this is I know this is somebody who's a new member. So I'm going to tell you that I have covered this topic extensively. So I'm going to cover it briefly here and then explain where to go for a deeper dive in this. And actually, Becky and I have covered this more extensively in blog posts and other AGE recordings. But technically, NIH has said that the review criteria are meant to change the way reviewers review the application, and it's not meant to change the way people write the application, which seems a little silly to me because, like, of course, the way something is reviewed is going to dictate the way you write it. So having said that, I don't tend to make dramatic changes to significance and innovation based on the new Factor 1 scoring criteria, except that when the innovation is not like really juicy and you're using kind of tried and true research methods that are not going to wow reviewers in terms of their innovation, I tend to kind of like de-emphasize that by combining significance and innovation into one section, because under Factor 1, the portion of that pertains to innovation actually allows for that eventuality that, it actually, in the old scoring criteria, it was strictly like, are the methods innovative, essentially. In the new Factor 1 scoring criteria, one of the things it invites reviewers to do is to what extent is innovation even relevant as it pertains to this project? Because maybe the appropriate thing to do is to use the gold standard methodology, and we shouldn't be pushing this person to use something different. Having said that, I've had a lot of clients say, I don't know that the reviewers are being educated in terms of that change. So do with that what you will. But so I haven't made dramatic changes in terms of the way I write it, except if for significance and innovation, except that when innovation is not super juicy, I tend to combine it with significance. And you can even call it Factor 1 importance of the research instead of significance and innovation. For a deeper dive on this topic, there are two places that you can go. One is go to the homepage where we have our blog. So Bouvier Grant, www.bouviergrant.com. In the upper right, you'll see a link to our blog and it's searchable. So you could just search simplified review framework and you'll pull up really detailed side-by-side analyses of the old and new scoring criteria. We also have done some mini tutorials on this. So if you go to your dashboard, you have, I'm thinking of I know you just purchased. So you have access to recordings of Ask the Grant Writing Expert on your dashboard. And if you go back into 2025, Becky, I'm trying to think. I think we did two sets of presentations. I think we did a set of presentations at the end of 2024, and then again, like in the middle of 2025, I think. Um, and if you can't find them, just email me, and I will give you the links to the dates of those Ask the Grant Writing Experts. But yeah, those are two places you can go where we've done a deeper dive on that. And we're gearing up to do another one because now I've seen a bunch of summary statements in the new scoring criteria, and NIH has released some other things that we want to comment on and blog about. So this is kind of an ongoing topic. All right, what else do we have here? Did that. Let's see. Oh my gosh, I think I did them all. Let me just double check this. Yeah, I think I've answered all the questions now.
I believe that we did that in late 2024,
And
October.
ask the grant writing expert, right?
October,
Yeah,
I think so.
so for the person who asked that, if you go on your dashboard to the AGE recordings, ask the grant writing expert and look for the look at the end of 2024. But I think we also did one we did another set, I think, or maybe they were just blog posts. But I thought
So, yeah, I'm looking at the old topics, and one was it was in 2023, but it was discussion of the potential new scoring criteria. So before it was released.
yeah, so look at the recording from late 2024 for the new scoring criteria. But really, I think the blog post is the place where you get, because I did a side by side, we kind of presented them. Here are the old scoring criteria, here are the new one. And we broke it out into factor one, factor two, and factor three. So there are three deep dives on the blog for the new scoring criteria. And Becky and I were just talking today about, oh, we need to do another one of these, especially because NIH has, I probably should just drop it in the chat because I think I still have the web page up. NIH actually has a, let's see.
You shared that with me? I had not seen that yet.
Yeah, I just emailed it to you today.
Yeah.
So it's learn what reviewers say about implementing the simplified review framework. So I'm going to drop that URL in the chat because this is coming up a lot. A lot of people have ongoing questions about the simplified review framework. So okay, I'm sending this to everyone. Paste. Yeah, it was an extramural nexus. Those come out of the, I believe those are still coming out of the Office of the Director of Extramural Research, who used to be Mike Lauer. I'm not sure who is the acting director at the moment. That's kind of one of the many things that's in a state of flux at NIH. But yeah, so that came out on January 14th. Learn what reviewers say about implementing the simplified review framework. So, yeah, I'm going to take a look at that, as will Becky. And I'm sure that we're going to be writing something up on that and potentially doing another presentation. Any other questions for us while we wait to see if people have questions? I am going to let you know about upcoming topics. So today's April 1st. We did the R35. On April 15th, it'll be my first day back after a vacation. So to make life a little easier for myself, I didn't do a mini tutorial. It's going to be a pure Q&A. So come and barrage me with your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And then on April 29th, which is 4 weeks from today, is the long-awaited and much anticipated mini tutorial on the R15, which I've been getting lots of questions about from one specific organization, a fairly recent member who is R15 eligible. And then as we move into May, it'll be mostly Q&A sessions. And also don't forget, today is April 1st. In 2 days, Friday, is my open office hours. So for those of you who are new to our live formats, I'll say that this biweekly live Q&A, we have a fair number of people attending here, so we ask people to type their questions into the Q&A box. But First Friday's office hours tends to be very informal and fewer people to come, at least for the time being. Maybe I have like a dozen people who cycle in and out during the course of an hour. So I enable people to speak there, and I can give you direct advising on your set of circumstances. So feel free to drop into those open office hours. I'll ask Riley if you could drop the registration for First Fridays in the chat. That would be great. Other things of note, I just recorded yesterday an update to the Master the T32. So of course, the T32, every couple of years, NIH completely revamps the way it does the data tables, which is like the hardest part of a T32. So we have updated that course. I recorded that yesterday. So you'll be seeing lots of mini tutorials and newsletter tips and blog posts on this topic because it's very much on my mind right now how to write these things. So future mini tutorials probably for the summer will be things like the 12 most common mistakes people make on T32 institutional training grants and how to know you're ready for an institutional training grant versus like an R25, which is what a lot of my clients do. They take one look at the training tables and they're like, I don't need full-time trainees. I'm okay with like a summer workshop. I'll do an R35, R25, and then I don't have to do the data tables. So a lot of people wind up doing that, which who can blame them? But yeah, so there'll be that course should be published by the end of April, and I'll be doing lots of social media and newsletter tips and mini tutorial and blog posts on that. So you'll be getting barraged with T32 information in the upcoming weeks. So, all right, let me double check and see if there are any more questions. Let me close the chat. It doesn't like when I have them open at the same time. Yeah, I think we're good. So so just as a reminder, you can check out our blog, which is on the homepage, www.bouviergrant.com. That URL is in the chat right now. Upper right, you'll see blog. It's searchable by topic, so feel free to peruse in there. Just be mindful of the dates because things change at NIH. So if you're reading a really old blog post, it may not be accurate, but Becky's blog post on the R35 should be up there within a business day. That we're just about ready to post that. And in 2 days, First Fridays, hope to see some of you there. That's at 11:30 Eastern. I hang out for an hour. And if people have questions, you can drop in and chat with me. And otherwise, I'll see you in 2 weeks on April 15th on my first day back from vacation. Go easy on me, please. But come with your questions and I'll do my best to answer them with my rested post-vacation mind. And otherwise, thank you, Becky, so much for coming. We'll try to keep everybody updated on when the ESI Mira and IGMS R35 posts. Again, it was supposed to post on March 1st. The next deadline is October 5th of 2026. Hopefully they'll have it out in plenty of time for you to write your application for that deadline. And otherwise, as the French would say, courage, hang in there, everybody. And I'll look forward to seeing some of you on Friday at 11:30 Eastern at office hours, or in 2 weeks at Ask the Grant Writing Expert at 3 p.m. Eastern for a Q&A. So thank you, Becky. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Meg.
Yep. And everybody have a great day. See you soon. Take care.
Bye.